So one of the answers on page 165. Kennedy. So one of the rivers is the Long He River or the Yellow River. It also has another nickname. You guys know what the other nickname is? So this is where China's civilization began. The Long, the Wang He, sometimes it's spelled Ho, Wang Ho. Okay, sometimes this is called the Yellow River. And sometimes it is called China's Sorrow. Why would they call it China's Sorrow? Isaiah.
Because of the flood and so many people died.
Okay. Like each of the other cradles of civilization, the rivers allowed civilization to start there, but they always struggle with the flooding. And the other river, it says name China's two major rivers. Really, there are three, but they only put. What are the three major rivers? The Xi River, Xi. And the Shangjing. This one is more commonly known for most of its time by the Yangtze River. So you might see it like that too. Means the same river. But where China's civilization first started was the first one. Okay? Okay, who else knows another answer? Aaron. What number are you doing? 2A? 3A? 3A says, how do historians know about the Xia dynasty? And what did you say? Stop the flooding? What's that have to do with the Xi dynasty? What? First of all, what is a dynasty? Let's review that. You need to know that again. What's a dynasty, Matt?
A dynasty is a rule of a family.
Okay, over many years. So, some people believe that the Shi dynasty is the first China's dynasty. Some people do. But other people say, no, it's the Shang. This is the first one. So the question here was, what do historians know about this dynasty?
I think it's the Shang.
Ah, and how come most historians only say it's the Shang?
There's written records.
Both of them have written records. Okay? So what's the difference? Why would they think the Shang is the first true dynasty and not the Shi?
Did they have older written records?
Did they what?
Have older written records?
No, the older ones were here. So you would think, well, that should be the oldest then, right?
Did you use radio carbon dating?
Well, radiocarbon dating will tell you how old some written work is. Yes, that's how they know this is older. Remember what our rule was at the very beginning of the year when we meet our textbook? And we said, Are the authors an authority? What's an authority?
You.
Someone in power.
What does that mean though? What's an authority mean?
A
Someone
person in power.
in more power than you. Like the person that
In terms of writing a textbook, what's an authority?
an author.
Because remember I said I could write a book on women's fashion. Didn't I tell you that? Remember that?
Yeah.
Does that make me an authority?
No.
I don't know a lot about it. So an authority means what?
Someone who knows.
Somebody knows a lot about it. Okay? We're not supposed to believe everything that we what?
See, here.
Read. Okay? So there were written records here, and some historians say this was just a what?
Cover.
A story. They can say it's only a story. Why?
They're not for sure.
How can they not be for sure?
Radiocarbon dating.
And how can they be sure of this?
They can't.
Literally, that's it.
They can. How can they be sure? Remember, we said before written records, the only way we could tell something about something is what?
Storytelling.
Isaiah.
The thing where they have the layers of dirt.
Strata.
And they're doing what?
Straight up.
And they're what?
In the lower.
And they're finding what? Artifacts. So the way you prove that your records that you're writing about are true is you what? You find artifacts that relate to what they wrote about. So I could say in 2020, the 6th grade class was studying, and they studied in desks, and they had computers that they could look up information. I could write all that down, and 10,000 years from now, somebody could find what I wrote down. What they might think is that what? Is that true or not? The way they find it's true is what?
Artifacts.
They find your desks. They find your computers. They dug them up. Or somebody threw them away. Well, that's what the problem here is with this dynasty, what? They haven't found any artifacts that match up with what the written record showed. So many historians believe this is somebody's just writing a story. So that's why there's discrepancies. Okay? So that's the answer to number 3A. How do historians know about it? Well, there were written records. Yes. But the reason some don't believe it's a dynasty, actual dynasties, because there were no artifacts to show it. Okay, who else knows some of the answers here? Yuli.
2A.
2A. Is this what you're saying?
No.
This is the one you should be saying. This is the river where Chinese civilization started. Okay? The Wang He. Or the Wang Ho. You know what He and Ho mean? What are those Chinese here?
It's time for you. Oh wait.
Hoe a shovel.
I speak what?
You know what this means? This word?
Hello?
River.
Hello.
I'm sorry.
It's
Now.
just a little funny.
Who else knows the question? So 2A should be this river. How about 1B? Who knows 1B? Matt,
They allowed them to grow crops, allowed them to expand, such as hunting and fishing, and it allowed them to become more advanced.
but it also, this is a term you're gonna need to know for China. And then okay? This word right here, isolationism.
Isolation, I know, is like alone, but
So I notice nobody's taking, or some of you aren't taking the notes. So when we ask this question on the test, you won't have it, because it won't be in the notes. Remember, the minimum of notes you should be doing is what? What I put on the board. So you're at least writing that, right? That shows me you're doing your what?
Work.
Your best, right? That's why we're here, to do our best.
yes.
Anybody was this defined in this section?
No, it's not in
What do you think it means? Aaron? You can you can always take, when you see big words, you can always try to do what?
Break 'em
Break
up.
it down. So if we break it down to this word, what's that word?
Isolate.
Isolate. What's it mean to isolate?
alone.
You're alone.
COVID.
Okay?
Quarantine.
Some of us had to isolate because we were either exposed or we got the virus. Okay? Well, in China, they have a natural isolationism. This is the policy of staying out of the world's affairs.
Well, they already identified over from it, so.
So it pretty much means we're sticking with where we are. Now, China historically has always had this policy of kind of staying out of the rest of the world, and part of it had to do, like India, to its geography. What's the geography of China? How does that contribute? How does geography contribute to isolationism? So here's China. China's over here. How does China what's all over here?
Ocean.
Water.
Well, yeah.
Makes it more difficult, okay? What's over here?
Land.
Deserts and
Land.
mountains,
Land.
okay? Desert, we got the Himalayas, which we already talked about with India, okay? We got desert all over here. So it's surrounded by barren areas and water on the other side. So historically, it has been always geographically isolated. And so they stayed isolated. In fact, it was other people trying to force their way in that exposed us to China. That's a good thing, because we're going to find out in terms of contributions, China has a ton.
Coronavirus.
Fireworks.
The
Fireworks
coronavirus there's been evidence to show it didn't actually start in China. Okay? So we're not blaming China on the coronavirus.
I'm still gonna blame because I don't know who to
Okay.
be mad at.
But they've had a ton of other achievements that we're going to be going through as we go through this section. Some of them you probably already know.
Like inventing
Fireworks.
ice cream.
Okay?
Didn't they make ice cream?
They made shoes.
What made China's river valleys ideal for farming? Just like all these other places in Mesopotamia and India,
I think
in
I know
Egypt?
2C.
the fertile soil after it is carried down.
I can do 2C.
Okay? What do Chinese artifacts reveal about China's earliest civilization? 2C.
Wait.
What did the artifacts reveal about their earliest civilization?
So you know what, if their written records are true. They're very smart.
Okay, how do we know that? They're talking about the earliest settlement. So when we talk about China's civilization, it covered thousands of years. So when we talk about some of the contributions, it spanned a lot of years. They're talking about the earliest years, like back here at this dynasty, the Shang dynasty.
That they thought that their rulers should be very protected.
Okay, that comes a little bit later, but yes. Okay. So obviously we didn't read this section, some of us, because these questions come right from what?
The book.
From the book, from the section. But it said they hunted, they fished, they used pottery, they made cloth, they established settlements. What does the use of oracle bones tell us about the early Chinese? That's the Shang. So we're going to say, since we don't have evidence here, we're not counting this as our first dynasty. So on the test, when I say what's China's first dynasty, you're going to say what?
We don't know. Not written. No.
You're going to say
No.
the Shang. Why?
Because there's no proof.
Because it
that,
actually has written
Xia
records and evidence
existed.
that it was.
Because they have evidence and artifacts to prove it. And one of the artifacts is this, oracle bones.
Wait, was Shang and
What are oracle bones? If you look at the top there, they show you a picture. Okay? They take a turtle shell here. Or sometimes they took bones of animals. And they wrote they wrote things on the bones. Then they threw it into the fire. And then what happens when you throw something into a fire?
it burns? It melts.
If it doesn't burn, it'll what?
Melt.
If it's a shell, a hard shell, it's not going to burn. It's going to do what?
Melt. It's gonna melt.
It's going to crack.
What?
It's going to crack. Okay? It's going to crack up. And so they had their priests in the Shang dynasty. The priests would take those shells and then they would read them. What's that called? Where they believe. So they predict the future from them. That's called prophecy. Okay? So they predict the future. So if you wanted to find out how your life was going, you go to the priest and you give them these shells and they put them in the fire and they would come out. And they know that how do we know this?
Because we found one.
Because they found oracle bones. How else do we know it? It was written down. They talked about this. That's why we have it in our textbook, right? Turn to page 166. Let's read together so at least we're going to read something. Okay, let's be honest, okay? How many read the first section really well?
That's getting confusing.
Raise your hand. You read it really well. You did a good job.
I read it, but not well.
How should you read things?
Well,
What helps you to read things well?
Glasses.
Take notes as you read.
how does that help me pronounce my dyslexia?
Okay?
You dyslexia?
No. I don't have. I just have trouble reading. My grandma thinks I have
You are a
dyslexia.
student of the famous teacher Confucius. What we're going to learn about next week.
Are you talking about
Like many older Chinese, he thinks that society has changed and not for the better. He believes in old values and a strict social order. He's trying to teach you and your fellow students how to behave properly. You must respect those who are your superiors in society. You must set a good example for others. How will these teachings affect your life? Well, they greatly affected the life. Even today, people in China follow the what?
Rule.
They follow the teachings of Confucius.
Confucius.
Somebody who was thousands of years in the past. He still has an influence. So that means Confucianism would be considered what? We should have this down now. I get people give me these blank stares every time you see it, and this is what we've been doing all year long, right?
They don't understand.
What does this mean? What does this mean?
Something that
Something that
they made and never carried.
Something they came up with that is followed today. Okay? That's used today by people, actively used. Or that it's in existence that you can go see it. Okay? So I'm giving you one of the contributions is what? I just read it. It's what? Confucius. Confucianism. His philosophy of Confucianism, we'll study it more next time. The ideas of teachings of Confucius. He has a lot of different sayings that he put into a book. And people even make funny sayings about Confucius saying. You want to hear a funny Confucius saying?
Yeah. Okay.
Confucius say, he who get high on pot, fall in toilet. The people of the Shang dynasty made many advances, including beautiful metalwork, a writing system, and a calendar. All those would be considered what? Contributions. Some of these traditions included the importance of family and social order. That's this part we're going to get to. Later thinkers look back with admiration to the values of the Zhou period. Okay, which is the next dynasty. So, the Shang is the first dynasty. The second dynasty is the Zhou, spelled with the Z-H-O-U. So if I was going to keep track of my dynasties, which I encourage you to do because you're going to see that on the test. Okay? First dynasty what?
Shang.
Shang. Second dynasty?
Zhao.
Zhou. In the 1100s BC, the leaders of a people who came to be known as the Zhou ruled over a kingdom in China. They joined with other nearby tribes and attacked and overthrew the Shang dynasty. The Zhou dynasty lasted longer than any other dynasty in Chinese history. So you can see on there, on the map, okay, the extent of the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou kings claimed to possess the mandate of heaven. This is what? Mandate of heaven. That means,
The way?
okay, that means they got their power to rule from where? From God. So they're saying their rule came from heaven. That means by having the mandate of heaven, the people that are under them would say, what? I shouldn't revolt. Why? Because God put them into position here, and I don't want to what? I don't want to disobey God. So they didn't have the same view of God as we have. But it's similar. So that's what the mandate of heaven is. And let's say, so they would have said, the Zhou would have said, the reason the Shang Empire was conquered was why?
His, their
King
tribe.
Because they lost the mandate of heaven. Because they're saying the only way you can rule, so that here they're recognizing the power of God over them, okay? The only way you can rule is if you have this mandate. Okay? That make sense?
Yeah.
Isaiah, you have a question?
Were they monotheistic or polytheistic? Or were we
Well, we're going to
that?
talk about some of the different religions. Okay? Confucianism is more a philosophy, but sometimes it's grouped into a religion. We'll talk about that. But the religion that dominates China today really started in India. One of the ones we already talked about. Guess which one?
Buddhism.
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 And we know Buddhism is what kind of religion? Polytheistic. So, but Confucianism philosophies even influence the people today. So according to this idea, heaven gave power to the king or leader, and no one ruled without heaven's permission. If a king was found to be bad, heaven would support another ruler. The Zhou came from an area to the west of the Shang kingdom. Early Zhou rulers used the mandate of heaven to justify their rebellion against the Shang. So they're saying, we have a right to rebel because why?
You lost.
Because the Shang lost the mandate of heaven. Later, Zhou rulers expanded their territory to the northwest and east. Zhou soldiers then moved south, eventually expanding their rule to Shangjiang, that river. The Zhou established a new political order. They granted land to others in return for loyalty, military support, and other services. The Zhou king was at the highest level. He granted plots of land to lords or people of high rank. Lords paid taxes and provided soldiers to the king as needed. Peasants, or farmers, with small farms were at the bottom of the order. Each peasant family received a small plot of land and had to farm additional land for the noble. The system was described in that book of songs from the Zhou. Everywhere under the vast heaven there is no land that is not the king's. Within the borders of these lands there are none who are not the king's servants. So again, what kind of society is that again? Just like all the other ones. Okay, it looks like what? Looks like this again, right? And at the top is who?
Oh, the Lord,
The king. And in China, it will be the emperor. Okay? And then you have the nobles. Okay? Now, the farmers, even though they're the most, the farmers have a higher position in Chinese society. So their status is higher even though they're poor. Why would you think this farmer's status would be higher?
because they give people food.
Yeah, because they provide the food that the people need. The Zhou system brought order to China. Ruling through lords helped the Zhou control distant land and helped ensure loyalty to the king. Over time, however, the political order broke down. Lords passed their power to their sons, who were less loyal to the king. Local rulers gained power. They began to reject the authority of the Zhou king. And then the decline of the Zhou. As the Lord's loyalty to the Zhou king lessened, many refused to fight against invasions. In 771, invaders reached the capital. According to a legend, the king had been lighting warning fires to entertain a friend. Each time the fires were lit, the king's armies would rush to the capital gates to protect him. When the real attack came, the men thought the fires were just another joke and no one came. Do we have stories like that? Okay.
Why is Australia's
The Zhou lost the battle, but the dynasty survived. After this defeat, the lords began to fight each other. By 481 BC, China had entered into an era called the Warring States period, a time of many civil wars. Armies grew, fighting became brutal and cruel as soldiers fought for territory and not honor. The decline of the Zhou took place along with important changes in the Chinese structure. For many centuries, the family had been the foundation of life in China. Large families of several generations formed powerful groups. When these families broke apart, they lost their power. Close relatives became rivals. What kind of families are those called?
Traders.
Okay, when you have,
Outcasts.
those are called
Divorce.
extended families. So extended families include parents, children,
Grandparents.
grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, okay?
About fifth cousins.
And they're saying when the Zhou were powerful, these families all what?
War. Came together.
They were together and they fought together. Okay? When they lost their power, they were fighting within their family. Lucas.
When they were like fighting against each other, or like when groups would fight, like would they like take the whole territory, or would they take these like
Again, they're fighting. So basically this period is a period called feudalism, where no one had enough power to rule over everybody. So basically, you tried to get with somebody that would do what for you? Protect you. Because it wasn't safe to go out into the countryside. You might be what?
killed?
You might be killed or attacked.
Yay!
Okay, or held to prison. So you had all these different feudal or kingdoms that were struggling for power. And it isn't until the next dynasty that we see a king comes in and becomes an emperor who takes control over everybody. So your assignment here, you got 10 minutes, you can probably do it. And some of you might already have it done. Okay? The assignment is to finish reading. So you're going to read 169 to 171 and take 5 notes. (169 to 171). Now, we got 10 minutes here. We could do 10 minutes of current events. Or you can do this assignment. I'll leave it up to you.
5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of current events.
Okay, James is given a third option. I'll allow that option. So, all current events, all study, half current events. Okay, raise your hand, all current events. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's over.
14.
Oh,
Okay, does everybody understand the assignment? Keep in mind, to get the bonus points, how many points you got to score?
57.
You got to have 500 if we teams. How many want to have teams?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Actually, no, I don't. Stop. No, solo. Because then we can.
Okay, teams. Lucas, have you been your spokesperson? Avery, have you been a spokesperson?
I've never been to school.
Okay, Avery's a spokesperson with Lucas. Do rock, paper, scissors, shoot, go.
What do I do again?
Avery.
It's like
You have to come over here and do it.
Wait, one at a wait, 3 or 1? I have no idea. Let's just do 3. Let's do 3.
Sorry, that's me. Oh, and can you eventually start
Who won? Okay, pick. Who's gonna be in the Big Ten playoff? What two teams are in the Big Ten playoff football?
Football?
Three, two, one. Okay, you guys are talking over. Give the answer.
Yes, how much do you know?
Avery.
I am Dolphins.
And Ohio State Buckeyes are playing who?
Northwestern, take Northwestern.
Hey, Avery. Pick a category.
Entertainment for 300.
Entertainment for 300. What was the #1 Redbox movie rented last week? Out of a Redbox. I'll tell you what, it relates to what we're studying.
Oh, I know.
These guys are in the bonus point area. Goes over here. Natalie. Fred, what was the last answer?
It was like football team. I mean, it was a sports team.
Cooper, what was the last answer? So this is your warning next time you guys get in 5 news reports.
No, it wasn't.
Fred, are you listening to me?
Oh, yeah.
No.
5 news reports means you have to go home, read the newspaper, or watch the news, and write a summary of 5 different things that happened. This is your warning if you're not paying attention. Natalie, what are you choosing? You can't do entertainment. They just did entertainment. It's been a while since we played, so I'm going to let it go this time. But you can't choose what your person chose or what the previous person chose. So sports and entertainment are gone. So you can have world, U.S. Minnesota, or miscellaneous. For how much? U.S. Minnesota for 200. This Native American tribe around Leech Lake, through a congressional act, is going to get 11,760 acres of their land back. What tribe was that? Around
I have
Leech
no
Lake.
idea. Gibbeling.
Search.
It's not even the answer.
No, you don't tell. That's only is for stealing. Yeah, you have to name the tribe.
I don't know
Okay, chance to steal.
I only know one tribe. Just say it. Because if it's worth a try.
I don't know.
I only know the cheese.
Say the cheese.
No answer?
Dakota.
The answer is the Ojibwe.
Yeah, I
It's over here.
Oh, is it my turn to say it? It's Maddie. Oh, it's miscellaneous for 200.
Miscellaneous for 200.
We had 200 over here, 200
Name any feast day this week. Oh, add 100 to every extra one you name. Any feast day. There's one even today. Answer? No. Steal.
No looking in your planners.
Oh, good idea, Jake.
Looking at Nikki. It was a joke.
That's one. Do you know any others?
Wasn't there like Our Lady? It would be Immaculate Conception.
Really? What'd you guys have on your desk on Monday? Because it happened on Sunday.
Wasn't there like Our Lady Guadalupe?
I just
Oh,
said
St.
that.
Nicholas Day.
St. Nicholas Day was on Sunday.
That's when the crackers should have come out.
St. Ambrose, we had this week Juan Diego, where you got the Guadalupe. And today is Pope St. Damascus. Wait, we got one more to do. We gotta give these guys a chance. You can tie it
For
up
500.
Entertainment.
for how much?
Thanks. 400.
Whoa. Bestie.
Name 2 of the top 4 popular
makes no
songs
sense
this
if you
past
go
week.
this
Top
way.
100.
Oh, it's Grady! Hi, Grady!
4.
No one
Why
misses
is
you.
it not working?
No one. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
No, it's because it's on this camera right
So
there.
this team wins.
Oh.
You guys know them?
Hello?
Was it wow?
Hit the off button. 2 of the top 4 songs. Mood. You guys ever heard of that song? Mood.
And oh yeah, that.
And number 2 is All I Want for Christmas Is You.
What? Of course it is.
3 is Positions. And 4 is Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. Can somebody hit stop here?